state your reasons for applying for the superintendency of our district?
Absolutely. Multiple reasons. First and foremost, I believe that everything that I have done in my educational career has prepared me for this moment. And as you've looked at my resume, you've seen the experience from classroom teacher to administrator to central office position right now, director of curriculum instruction. I have had some great mentors, and when I was a teacher, I would have never imagined sitting here. But as I've had my opportunities for leadership and recognizing that everything we do is about the classroom instruction and what we do for kids, I feel that those have been the right preparations for being a superintendent, along with the other experiences, obviously, in central office that I'm going to ask me about more later. So that's one. The other is in terms of why Big Rapids. I've grown up in West Michigan. I grew up in Fremont, actually, so not too far from here. And I have two children. One is now leaving and heading off to college, but the other will be in 4th grade. And just as when I looked at Fruitport and moved to Fruitport, the first and foremost question before any of such moves is about, is this the kind of community, is it the school district that I would be willing and feel would be a great place to raise my family? And so now it'll be the one son versus both. So that is always my first and foremost question when I ask about, now obviously moving into a superintendency, where might that be? Obviously we love West Michigan. There is no other beautiful place, I think, in the state. In addition, though, Big Rapids is certainly well known among superintendents and other area districts, sports-wise, fine arts-wise. You make USA News today, and people know that. Certainly, I think one of the values that Big Rapids offers any incoming superintendent or an administrator, a teacher that might consider being a member of Big Rapids is your community, your connections with Ferris, and what I get is a very good sense of commitment to schools. There's a real sense that education is important here. And when I think about what I have to bring in terms of instructional leadership, fiscal responsibility, I am a leader that is about communication. I'm authentic. People will know exactly what I mean when I say it, and that I have follow through. I think that that's the type of leader that perhaps Big Rapids is looking for. And so that's why I'm here today. You're welcome.
I have a two-part question for you. What have you learned about our district so far? And do you have some suggestions for creating a specific direction for our district based on what you do know?
Okay. Well, in terms of what I've learned, again, a couple of things that I've already mentioned. It's very clear the commitment to education. I mean, that part is clear. When you look at the number of community members, staff, parents that are involved in your district, there is certainly an element that your parents as well as community care about the success of students, and so they engage themselves, whether it's in your boosters, your various booster programs that are supporting education. You have now I may not get the right name because it was a different acronym, but the foundation, the fund that people now can offer monies to help buy computers and technology and all those other kinds of things. That's a recent event, and yet it's already starting to gain momentum. So there's a clear sense of commitment. You're well known for your fine arts, your academics. My understanding is that you have a top-notch administrative team, and you, even just by looking at your financial statements, you are, like all of us, are in that situation where how do we keep programming here and also begin to look at what might have to go. And it looks to me that you've been really sound and focused on classroom instruction from everything that I've seen. So there's a lot. When you think about vision or where to go next, I truly believe that you have a lot already here, and it's about taking it perhaps to another level. As a superintendent, it is, and as a leader, it is my belief that I don't come in and tell us all where we're going, but rather that has to be a shared direction I have been fortunate enough to be a part of 2 strategic plans in Fruitport Community Schools. And those strategic plans all stemmed or came first and foremost from community input. So we began with focus groups that were asked some questions. Out of those questions arose some issues and some concerns, as well as some hopes and dreams. And then out of that, we created surveys. Our community is a little smaller than yours, but we were very proud. The last strategic plan, we had over 900 respondents. And from that, we have a stack of data this deep. And from that, we created our second strategic plan. And so it isn't about a superintendent setting, I don't think, the vision. It really is about the community setting that vision. What do we want for the students of Big Rapids? I certainly have a role to play in that, for sure, facilitating and leading such a strategic plan. But I really think it has to come from all of us for multiple reasons. If not first and foremost, because well, 2, I think, key reasons. One, I think that the strategic plan attends to more of the needs and is even better by the fact that it includes more voices. Second of all, I think that it is only through that way that you get buy-in to truly make that vision come alive and actually happen. And so, I think that education is changing. There's no doubt about it. We have higher standards that very soon we will be held to. You have a great, part of the reason why you were in the USA News today is because of that college level readiness level. But at the same time, we know that all of our high schools in Michigan have farther to go in terms of making sure that whatever the world is asking of students in the future that you and I cannot predict, that we're on the cutting edge and making sure that they're prepared to do that. And that's part of, I think, that strategic plan and making sure that we're addressing those future needs. Suzanne, is there more that you would like from that, or does that help for now?
I think that helps for now.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome.
I have the next question.
Okay.
And it's a description. Describe the process that you would go through or use to assess the condition of the school district's finances, educational programs, and community relations. So the 3 parts.
Good. Okay. Well, and I think that's also true in terms of helping set vision. The more that a superintendent or a new leader gets to know their district in terms of its administrators, its principals, its board, you all have hopes and dreams, I have no doubts. Administrators have hopes and dreams and all of that. And so part of that first 90-day plan or 100-day plan for any new leader is truly to get to know the community that they're coming to. And so it fits right into your question, how do you assess? So working with the business office in terms of, especially at this time of year, we're already beginning to look at, well, of course, things change again this week in Lansing, but as best we know from given today, what do we anticipate for student enrollment? What will that mean in terms of where we'll be budget-wise for next year? One of the things that would be important for a new superintendent for me is to understand some of the recent events in terms of EduJobs and ARA funds. Where are we as a district with those? What pieces of those might be moving forward, not moving forward, special ed, and really getting the big picture of where we've been, how we're sitting. Certainly, we've all had to make cuts over the last 4 or 5 years, some of us more so than others. And so what have we already done, and what have we tried really hard to avoid, and what are some things we're talking about? And it also includes, I think, a conversation like with administrators. At least from the work that we've done in Fruitport, we work hard to include our administrators who are in the trenches every day, who have the best sense of their programs and what students need. And so also working with them in terms of their resources, where do they feel they are, that kind of thing. So financially, I think it's a combination of both. And also, of course, talking with the board and asking you your thoughts. Where have you been as a board? What are the conversations you've had as you plan forward? What have you talked about in terms of how to really kind of ride these rough times out? So the other question was educational programs, right?
Educational programs.
Good.
Relations.
Yes. Well, fortunately, for me, because I've been, I oversee all K-12 programming, preschool, adult ed. I have the whole district responsibility. The beauty of that is that like any good district with good administrators who are working hard every day to improve their buildings, I walked into a district that where maybe the high school's off doing something and the middle school's off doing something and 3 elementaries are all off doing something. So part of it is really getting a sense of where they've been, the improvement efforts that they've been doing, and what are the common threads and the common themes, and perhaps there's some pieces of that that we need to do a better job of moving forward with. That's certainly been the role that I've played in Fruitport over the past 4 years, and I'm happy to say we are more on the trend together versus little islands. And so the same would be true for coming into Big Rapids. Where are we? Where have our buildings been? What have our administrators been working with their staff and their parents with regard to students? I think asking staff as well as parents and students and I don't know if I say teachers, administrators, and I think a strategic plan can do this as well. What do we feel are our strengths? And if we could fix some holes or perhaps improve upon some issues, what would those be? And so that, again, could be through a strategic plan. It may just be through meetings and walking through classrooms and talking with staff. It's my belief that an effective superintendent is one that's visible. And certainly the first 90 to 100 days, that's exactly what I would need to be, is that person who learns that. For community, kind of the same thing. Again, it can be through a strategic plan in the long term, in a little bit longer term, okay, over the course of perhaps a year. But in a more immediate sense, really being present at activities of students, joining local groups that, whether it's a Rotary or a Lions Club or any of those other kinds of our ISDs, and really getting a sense of what are the community concerns, what are they, obviously they have a great deal of pride, there's no doubt about that, you can feel that anywhere you go in Big Rapids. So those things that we are most proud of, that we would hate to lose, things that perhaps we'd also like to build upon. So as a way of trying to assess where the community feels we are as a district as well. So it can be face-to-face as well as planning, conversations. I think that's a big piece of what any good superintendent does. So, okay? All right. Hi, John.
What do you think is your greatest administrative strength, and how would it help to our Big Rapids schools improve?
I believe that my biggest strength lies in my ability to bring groups of people together and be truly collaborative. And that is that we can set forth what it is we're trying to accomplish, or maybe something that we want to know more about. And I'm very good at bringing a diverse group of people all together and allowing, obviously including each in the process, but recognizing that ultimately we come to a consensus or a middle ground or even just a grander vision than what we might have been able to create ourselves. Or maybe even it's a solution that all by myself I couldn't have done, or even the central office team couldn't have done, but really as a whole. People talk about my facilitation skills, and I think it's a value added to being a superintendent who can really facilitate strong conversations and processes. Just recently, my own superintendent in Fruitport has asked that I might even lead our strategic plan. Typically we hire someone in tight financial times, that gets difficult. But because I have that strong ability to, when people are in the room, I'm able to make them comfortable. And I believe only through honesty. The tough conversations have to happen if we truly move forward in the right direction. And those are the kinds of things I think I'm most proud of in terms of my leadership. I also believe, though, that I'm very focused on what it is we need to do. So we can have lots of conversation and lots of great ideas, and sometimes those ideas aren't on topic. It isn't why we're here or what we need to be talking about. And so bringing us back to what's most important and what is it that we truly need to do. Everybody comes with their different interests and their different perspectives, and that's valued. And then at the end of the day, what's best for the district, that district vision. I think that, over the last 4 years, that's really given me that opportunity to be that district voice. We have great administrators in Fruitport too, and their job is to advocate for their building. And we want them coming to the table advocating for their building. That's what we most appreciate with what they do. So who is that person then that can also look at it as a district perspective, community perspective, parent perspective, teacher, you know, bringing that all together and really being able to see it through that lens. I believe I do that also very well. And I could keep going, John.
I think,
Yeah.
other than, what would the results, how would you see that, what the results of that?
Well, first and foremost, I think that it would result in a highly functioning administrative team. I think highly functioning state of tree. I'm gonna start over.
Yeah, I know.
Administrative. I know, but I have to get it right now.
Teams.
I think that has a huge impact on how those leaders are able to go back to their own buildings and lead. Okay, if we are dysfunctional at the central office level and administrative level, that has an impact on buildings. And so I think that it helped. You know, part of my job is to serve. All of my job is to serve others. So serving administrators, serving teachers well by being that kind of a leader. I think that it would result in having a vision that leads us forward into what are going to be challenging times, keeping a focus on student learning and with all that we do. And I think that it ought to help improve programming in the areas that we want to improve. You know, again, as of next year, we're all going to be in the same place. We recognize that in terms of the new cut scores, et cetera. We will be compared nationally on now same test kinds of things, just like we have been like with ACT and NAEP. But I think there's going to be pressure. And what we want to make sure is that we're focusing in, we attend to that, but we're also focusing in on what it is we want for the whole child. You know, that's that child that comes through Big Rapids. And that we don't get caught too much in the testing world, that we don't forget who we are and what we want for kids. And I think that's a great value for me, keeping us focused on kind of the eyes on the prize kind of things that we used to say in the civil rights movement. Okay? Thanks.
I got the next one.
Okay.
While we're all dealing with shrinking budgets and
Yes.
doing more with less, and class sizes are rising, give me some examples of how you're going to help build staff morale and trust.
It's a good question, Diana, because it does have to happen. At the end of the day, we're here because we need to educate kids, and we need to be able to walk into those classrooms, walk into those buildings, and really be up for children and up for parents. And one of the first and foremost ways, I think, is for myself to stay up and excited and be that cheerleader, which I believe I am. I'm highly energetic and very positive. I absolutely believe that, you know, whether it's 5 years from now, I hope it's not 10, I hope it's about 5, we're going to look back and say, whew, I'm glad we made it through that, because we will. There's just no doubt about it. I think making sure that we're listening well to all of our constituents, you know, our staff, our parents, et cetera. They do have fears, they have concerns about, you know, is my program going to get cut, is this going to happen? So the better communication we have, I believe, will hopefully keep a little bit of the fears down. You know, I think very soon we will have a much better direction, that, you know, things will be finalized in Lansing. It does look like Governor Schneider will have his way, and there will be an early budget plan. That's even if it's not as pretty as what we'd hope, at least it gives us that direction, and we can begin planning for the future, and people will have a better sense of where they will be. I have no doubts that, just like in Freeport, there's lots of trepidation in being able to allay those fears with a good plan as to where we're going. Again, I think being that cheerleader, being out there, let's celebrate student success. You know, out of all of this, it comes back to that. And so are we making sure that we're doing that? Are we celebrating our administrators? Are we celebrating the connections we have with parents and the activities that we do? And really, again, keeping that focus. That's why we're here. And sometimes, perhaps, we talk too much about the bad things that are happening. And so let's check ourselves and make sure that we're talking about, you know, students and teachers and all the good things we're doing. So, you're welcome.
Wendy, I have an action. It was Big Rapids Student Success Fund. You said that fund we had is Big
Yes.
Rapids Student Success Fund.
Student Success Fund.
But everyone was received suggestions for improvement in their performances reviews. What was a suggestion for your improvement in your last evaluation, and how have you been working on that area?
Let's see. Well, it's been a while. What I remember is Sometimes I think it's about balance for me. Wanting to do it all and wanting it all to happen today. And so making sure that that passion for all that we want to accomplish is checked by the fact that we honor and accept that change takes time. That was the one I recall. And I do think I've done a lot better with that. Again, there are reasons why we have such great teachers and great administrators in our districts. It's because they want to be there. They want all the best. And they take on lots of things. I think one of the things, Pete, that I've been able to do with, I lead principal meetings twice a month. That's my charge in Fruitport. And they can take on a lot. And so sometimes it's about even bringing them back and saying, let's look at a balance for you. And as much as this might be valuable, is there perhaps a smaller piece to take on? So I think providing that guidance also to administrators, because we can take on a lot. And even more so in these days and times when we ask administrators to have more hats in the game. Really, I can't think of another one, Pete. I think that it really was, my superintendents have been really good about making evaluation about professional growth, which is taking your strengths and how do we move those forward. And so using my leadership in our strategic plan 2 was a conversation that we had with superintendent and the role that I would play in leading that vision forward. And so again, it was about growth, not necessarily weaknesses, but balance I think is hard for all of us in education because we're just overachievers and we're excited about what we do. Okay?
Very good.
Thank you.
It's back to me now.
Okay.
How would you evaluate our curriculum and the use of technology to improve student learning?
Okay, good. I think at the end of the day, curriculum is evaluated by data, okay? It shouldn't just be a MEP score, however, although we were just told this week that the new test from in 2014 will actually be in the spring of 2015, which means it will actually assess what students learned that year, not how much summer setback they've had. So we're very excited about the shift, I think, that will happen in our assessments. It really is about balanced data. We have been able to get to a place in Fruitport, especially at the elementary levels. We have now at least 3 data points that we look at to measure whether a student is having success in the core curriculum. At the middle school, we're at 2 data points, and at the high school, we're at 2 data points. They recommend 3, so that you never make a decision about a child based on, a single score. And so a question has to be, if there's a large population of students not doing well, that indicates that we have what's called a core curriculum issue. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. It can be that we as teachers may not be clear about what it is we're supposed to be teaching, so there's a professional development aspect to that. It could be that we don't have adequate resources. We just recently started a new math program in Fruitport because as we looked across the years, the longer kids were in Fruitport, the worse their math scores got. So we weren't, the less competent they were in math. But we had 3 elementary schools all doing 3 different things and there was no common language, no common curriculum. So you look at stuff like that and where was it derived from? It was based on data. And so that's one piece. I think too, in terms of is the curriculum being offered really developing what we consider our vision for Big Rapids students. My sense of Big Rapids is that it's really looking for well-rounded students that have a lot of strengths in lots of areas, not just math and reading and science and social studies. And so we'll be offering that variety of curriculum that we really want students to enjoy and to be able to excel at. And then I think also listening in with administrators and teachers as to what they feel are the successes of the curriculum. Are they having struggles with a certain, for example, maybe we're starting to see that if we offer an 8th grade algebra class, high school algebra, the numbers are going down. Well, let's talk about maybe why. But again, that's a data point. So it's about those conversations. And then in terms of technology, fortunately we were able to, when I was interim superintendent for the summer a couple years ago, we applied for a QSAP bond and we were able to get that bond. We were very excited that we passed it. A big piece of it has been technology. So we have just finished our RFP and accepted our bids for what we call the technology carts. And the next step is how do we train staff so that as this comes into their classrooms, more and more of their teaching and curriculum is through that technology. Not just simply for the sake of using it, but really using it to encourage teaching and learning. I think part of the, again, is through your administration, okay? And they have that role to play. It's also through walkthroughs. It's through perhaps new teacher training and the training of all staff. I lead new teacher training in Fruitport, and we just had our end of the year celebration last Monday. And all of their jobs was to come back and bring in one example of how they are now using technology. They blow me away. I mean, from a speech pathologist using an iPad with one of her students because he isn't so good at talking back and forth to an adult, but loves talking back to the computer. I mean, from application, and this is an application that she found out there. It wasn't anything she had to create. There are hundreds of applications out there that I don't think we've even begun to realize. To a second year algebra teacher who is blowing the socks off test scores in 9th grade because of the Moodle that he's created. He records all of his lessons. They're all there, demonstrations. His students can access it at any time, so if they struggle, if they can't remember how to do a problem, they can go back, tap into that online piece, and keep going and growing. So again, I think it's about strategic plan. It's about where do we want to go with technology, and what's the expectations for staff, and how do we support them so that they can do it well. What we don't want to do is have 140 staff show up in the fall. They all have a new technology cart and they don't know what to do with it. And so how do we make sure that we do that? We are actually studying Marzano's work, not actually Marzano's, but an application of Marzano, his 9 best strategies, and they've written a book about how to use technology to teach to those strategies. And so that would probably be the professional development we do with our staff. And we are using core teachers to do that, which I'm very proud of. We have 5 teachers who've been pilot teachers this year, all trying different carts, reading the book with us, and they're helping us lead that process for staff for next year.
You summarize that technology curve for me.
Sure, I will. Yep, absolutely. We did some site visits because we too wanted to know, what to include, what not to include. How do we make sure that it's going to have something for us 5 years from now? And that has changed, even throughout the year that conversation has changed. So every classroom will have a widescreen but close projector to the wall. If I would have brought my cell phone, I'd have pictures. And it is a interactive projector, so we do not need to purchase whiteboards, but rather the projector itself is interactive. And so I believe at least 2 students can be up at the whiteboard working at any one time, but it's actually software through the projector itself. On the technology cart, there is a teacher workstation, and there is a DVCR. Even though that sounds like old technology, we recognize that so much of what we still have is VCR in terms of tapes, and so we do not want to lose those resources for staff. But it also has a control panel. You can switch with a click of a button to go from any of the pieces. So whether I want to be on the internet with my computer, I want to have a video going, or we also have the speaker system so that students hear children better. I think we're going with the 4 speakers in the room, so it's an auditory system as well. Student microphone, teacher microphone, etc. I'm trying to think if I've missed any components.
Elmo.
Elmo, yep. We have. We didn't go with the Elmo brand, but yep, we absolutely have that. And we have a specialized design cart because one of the things we realize is if you're a first grade teacher and you want to use your little camera, that needs to be down here, whereas if I'm a high school staff person, it needs to be up here. Because part of the goal is obviously for students to come up and use it as well. And so we've made some adjustments in that cart. And on the front of the cart is a beautiful Trojan. And so that's our cart. We spent all year studying so that we would really use taxpayers' dollars really well. And we have a great staff, and we've gotten lots of good feedback, and I think we've made a good choice in terms of how we move forward.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
So every classroom will have their own cart, or they have to share a cart?
Every classroom will have its own cart.
What was the cost on those about?
I know it's under 9,000, but I think it's a little over 8. And we had, in the bond project, we had estimated for around 8,000 per. As you probably know, times are hard, and so our Our bids are coming in low, and so we've had some extra, so we are upgrading, I think, the projector and to a newer version, as well, I believe, as the camera. So we're able to build in a little extra because those bids are coming in lower than expected. So, yep, we're excited. It's going to be big for our tech people all summer.
What is the most important accomplishment during the past 3 years as you work to improve student learning, and how do you evaluate your results?
Good question. I think we've had a lot of successful ones. I think the one I just described is a result of several years' worth of work and visioning. I would also say, though, that my focus on literacy. And when I mean literacy, I need to distinguish from, a third grader that may be on a Dibbles test or an Ames Web test or a REAP test looks like they're in the 80th percentile, but if you follow that child, unfortunately, through to 5th grade or middle school, we find that they're not doing as well. And when you talk to them about what they're reading, or you ask them to synthesize what they're reading, they're not the kind of critical readers we need. Okay, and so that's across the country that happens. Is that at the lower level they look like they're doing great, but as we get into these tougher content areas with much bigger vocabulary that they may never have had any experience with. And now I have to read to understand and think about it. That's a very different skill than what I, as a first grade teacher, am teaching. So as we again looked at our data across Fruitport, we knew that we were sending too many kids to middle school who were not those kind of strategic readers, and we had too many students who still get to an ACT, and they can't read with the kind of speed and accuracy and understanding and comprehension that not only do they need for the ACT, but they really need for the real world work as well. And so we have led a literacy initiative in Fruitport, or I've been a part of that, leading that. And we have a couple of highlights. One, we have a couple of specialized programs even in our middle school and high school that are trying to address strategically those lowest readers. And they're making leaps and bounds. Last year at this time, our middle school staff person and our school psych came to our Board of Ed and showed the data, the results of those students, and the results in the middle school. We have more students who are becoming unqualified for special ed reading as a result of those efforts. So that's how we evaluate whether we're being successful, again, as we go back to the data. At the high school level, we have a key teacher in our alternative high school program, of which we have 40 students. Obviously very much struggling readers, haven't even enjoyed reading until we have really focused in on it. And this teacher has gotten them excited about reading. Now they get to go to Barnes & Nobles and pick out books, and they're excited about going to Barnes & Nobles and picking out books. And just that you can walk in and that you can hear them talking about words and books they're reading. Tied to that also was a visit by John Corcoran, which was a highlight of our career, my career. John Corcoran was the teacher who couldn't read. If you've never read his book, I highly recommend it. He's a wonderful human being, and he's out trying to solve the literacy problems of the world. Went through school, college, became a teacher, literally unable to read. And all that he had to do in his life to get through that. And how we don't want any children coming out of school who can't do that, or even feel in 3rd grade that they're a non-reader. So that was exciting. And then finally, as a piece of that same thing, when we went to all-day kindergarten, it was my personal conviction and promise to our school board that Fruitport would not become a statistic. Because most studies show that all-day kindergarten, if you compare them to half-day kindergarten, by 4th grade, their performance has pretty much leveled out. We weren't going to do that. My hypothesis was we do a great job in kindergarten, but then we don't really think about who those kids are and how they're now different in 1st grade. So when they get to 1st grade, they're coming in at different levels. Are we making sure that we're meeting them where they are and raising the bar? And that's been my task in Fruitport, is then to work with those 1st grade teachers when those kids come to 1st grade and raise the bar. And it's been exciting. You can talk to kindergarten and 1st grade staff. They've never had readers this far. They've never had students in January where our students are this year. And so, of course, you can imagine the task next year is working with those 2nd grade staff, because they will have 2nd graders who have never been where they are. And of course, we've been telling middle school and high school staff they're coming, we're getting them there. And so they're looking forward to that, ultimate as well. So that's one of the, I guess, the initiatives that I can be very proud of and excited about in terms of all the work that the district has done in that area. Okay?
Wendy, how do you
Yes.
balance as a superintendent the importance of academic, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities in the district?
Yeah, it's especially this time of budget time, that's hard. It's a good question. Well, I mean, first and foremost, we know we're here because of academics. I mean, that's why we all exist, and we recognize that. We also recognize what it is that students get out of those other programs, because they do. They get those leadership skills. They get an opportunity to shine in ways that perhaps they haven't had in, say, the science classroom or the math classroom. They build teamwork. There is a sense of we're in this together. And that's very valuable when you and I think about the kind of people that we want to be sending off into our communities. It's my belief that we want to create children who someday we would love to have as neighbors, those kind of people. And we know that those extra programs do a lot of that. They really build, I think, a lot of self-confidence. And so, number one, I think that we all have to have shared sacrifice. If there's one word, I appreciate from the governor is that it does have to be that. I'm not sure it's shared in terms of the governor's budget, but when we look at a district budget, it can't just be pick on athletics or pick on fine arts. Those are programs that can cost more money. There's no doubt about that. But I believe we have to try and find ways to hold on to elements of all of that, because it is a piece of all that we bring to our students' education. Sometimes we have to, I think out of the box. Your fund is one example where you're actually allowing others to contribute, because maybe there isn't money to buy that, iPad for that teacher who could really use it for special needs students, for example, or maybe there isn't. So I think looking outside the box and saying, so for example, someone asked me the other day, you think you just have to cut sports? I don't think that's ever the question. I think the question is, in what ways can we find reductions across the entire budget? What would that mean to the program? If we see a significant impact to the program, then we say, is there another way to get there? And it's about pushing ourselves, is there another way? What else might we be able to do? And really looking across the entire budget in terms of what we might be able to do. So they're absolutely important. So balancing, I think it's about that conversation, and making sure that that word balance is right out there. How do we ensure balance for our students? And I think it's just like a constant thing, Susan, that we have to do, is have that conversation. You're welcome.
All right, the next one. Our district has made AYP in all buildings.
Yes.
How would you maintain or improve that progress?
Great question. AYP is a great thing in terms of, we can say that we're making growth towards that ultimate, 100% proficiency. One of the questions we would ask is, when we look at our curriculum, when we look at what students are able to do, when we look at products that perhaps students are creating in each of those buildings, are they performing at the level that we want them to? Is there more to what we might want? So I take you back to that notion of really having critical thinkers and readers. There is a lot of evidence that with a lot of the push from the state of Michigan towards these content expectations, et cetera, we can sometimes become like a checklist, that I'm just here to check off these content expectations that I taught. But do we really have meaningful curriculum that's highly engaging to students, where they're connecting their curriculum to the outside world? They understand why they're learning what they're learning because they see it happening. There is, I think, high levels of thought going on, and recognizing that for what that is for each child may be a little bit different. But there's real application. What we know about the new balanced assessment program that will be coming our way by 2015 is that the level of rigor in those tests will be much higher. In fact, it's actually going to be computer adaptive. So if I do really well in math, it's going to take me to a higher level. It's going to take me to a higher level. rather than the meat, which has been more about basic, can I do these things? So wouldn't it be nice that in 2015, when our students at Big Rapids take that, and that computer adapts to them, that we realize just how well they can do it? Because now, there isn't a stop, there isn't a ceiling on it, but they can go higher and higher and higher. And wow, won't we be very excited when we see just how well of thinkers, because it is supposed to be about application and synthesis, how well they really can do. It's going to be a huge change. And I think we all need to make sure that we take the next couple of years to get truly, I think really be honest with what our students are really truly able to do in terms of applying what they're learning so that they'll be ready for that kind of rigor. And I'm not sure, did I answer all of your question?
How would you maintain and improve progress? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, okay.
Now we'll go back to data.
Okay.
It's led right into, I
Okay.
imagine, there. Can you give us an example of how you use data to improve your district's performance?
Sure. You've heard about the literacy, and that's always been about data. We now collect 3 different points of data, so I won't talk about that one again. The other piece, though, is elementaries and middle schools have been data rich because of the MEP, but our high schools have not. And so for many years, our high school's been like, suddenly we're now held to a new standard, the Michigan Merit Curriculum, but we don't have a lot of instruments to measure it because they stopped taking a MEP in 8th grade, and they don't do anything again until 11th. So we looked and looked and looked. So since I've been in Fruitport, the movement that we've made in those 4 years is we do now give the Plan and the Explore, which are both ACT aligned. Our departments do look at that data, and they do set both department school improvement goals, department goals, but also building goals related to those. And it's also a great communicator down to our middle school, who is also doing Explore, but just in terms of looking at those trends. So for the first time, we have middle school staff who can actually begin to follow their students into 9th and 10th grade and see where we're doing well and the areas that we're not doing so well based on those readiness scores. Because ACT does provide you with cut scores saying, or benchmarks of where you would like your students to be if they will achieve this level on the ACT. And the other piece, though, was on reading. We didn't feel like we had a good measure for progress in reading for those other grades. We do it well at elementary. We don't do it so well in middle school and high school. So we did some research. Our high schools went out visiting, our middle schools went out visiting. We did choose the Scholastic Reading Inventory that we are now giving 3 times a year to all of our students across the district because we recognize we don't have our kids reading where we want them. And it is a great way, it's a system that allows a student to look at their own progress. So if I'm here, that's not negative, but rather, what do I need to do to grow here? Those are conversations that we haven't typically had at the secondary level. They're now beginning to happen because we have that data. It's always about what kind of data do we need that truly is going to tell us what we want. Sometimes it exists, and sometimes there aren't good assessments, but I think it's getting better. And then having the time to actually use it. Because again, we can be data rich, but sometimes knowledge poor in terms of what we need to do with it. So it's another example.
You pretty much already answered my follow-up that I've been asking you. That's where we are now. Where are we going in the future with data, and what are the state's expectations, and how will we fund? How will this be funded?
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot of
we see
change
a problem
coming
with
that
it
way.
being funded.
Yep, a lot of change.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you have what's called a data warehouse. So we're fortunate to work through Kent County, and we do have a data warehouse where all of our data can go to, and our teachers can have access to it. And as you know, I'm sure the state of Michigan now is asking each of us to evaluate both administrators and teachers based on this data. They're creating kind of a system. And so I think a lot is going to change in terms of between now and the next couple of years in terms of which data we use and how much of that will be a factor in evaluation and school improvement. I think there is the goal of this new assessment is that it's balanced. So for example, we've been told now that during that 6-week window in 2015, students will actually get to take this test twice. If they don't feel like they've done well, they can actually take it again. There'll be different questions. Well, isn't that a much better, will we not know better how our students are doing as a result of that? Because one of my, I guess, beefs, so to speak, with the State Department is that we've been trying to do school improvement in Fruit Board on math scores that have only asked kids to be able to be proficient on about 40% of the test. How is that the kind of good data that really drives school improvement? So I think we're smarter now about this. I think the State Department is providing more support, but guaranteed there will still be a lot of work to be done at the local level and through our ISDs to really meet that challenge. Does that help, John?
You know, one last little part.
Yep.
How expensive do you think it's going to be?
Oh, that's a good question. I just sat through multiple presentations yesterday, and there are data systems out there that can be as much as $4 a student to $6 a student, to some that are only $1.50. You know, but you'll pay for how comprehensive it probably is. I think that it doesn't mean that you have to go to the most expensive system. I think that it is change over time. It is taking a look at what we need today, and also with that eye on the future. And I don't know what initiatives your ISD has in terms of a data warehouse. I'm gonna look over there. We do have one.
Yeah, we're in our 6th year.
There you go.
We're
And,
down the trail.
yep. And so a lot of it is going to depend on how we, at the local level, communicate with our ISDs about what we need that data warehouse to do. The technology's there. It's about part of it is that we can have the foresight to know what's coming down the road, so that as our ISDs adapt that data warehouse to the changing needs that we need. And that can happen in a timely way. That's something we struggle with, is that timeliness of it all. The scores, the tests get taken, but then when is that data available for staff and that turnover of data? It gets tough, because just as you all, our administrators are, we sock them with a lot to do, and we all have more to do. And yet that data piece is really important in terms of driving the goals for the future. So it's hard to tell, but it's not going to be, it's not going to not cost money, but it will. There's lots of applications out there. People are really making some good products, I think, for schools these days. Okay. Wendy, yes.
Could you give us some specific examples about how you would keep your staff, the board, and the community updated on issues that are going to impact our district?
Sure. Specifics. Well, we'll start at the board level, and then and community level, and then we'll move down. For the board, it's certainly communicating on a weekly basis, both in email form, phone calls when it's necessary for phone calls, especially if something is coming up and there isn't the kind of time that we might be able to do via email, but rather it's more important that everyone here. I've had great mentors in my district, and the one that sticks out most in my mind in terms of his ability to communicate and keep board members up to date is Nick Similaric, who's now the superintendent in Hudsonville, and he just he modeled for me that need to just have a constant communication with the board president when that's necessary, but the entire board when that's necessary, and sometimes that is necessary. I love the fact that he would deliver board packets, and I just, when I was a principal, I used to do coffee talks with the principal, and it reminds me a lot of that idea, that just that quick time to have a face-to-face contact. Board packets go out for our district once a month, and so that opportunity to talk, what questions do you have about what's happening, et cetera. And then we have, I didn't see it on your website, whether you have subcommittees at the board level?
We do.
I thought you did, yep. And obviously that's a key place. On the one hand, each subcommittee is charged with very specific oversight of specifics, parts of the program, whether it's finance, student affairs, or personnel. But at the same time, there are certain elements that I think every board member needs to hear about, things that are happening, that are being brought to the other committees. Not that it's too repetitive, but that it just keeps everybody apprised of what's coming on. I think no surprises is the rule. There just ought never be. The same would be true for, I think, the community, being proactive. As even as we're heading into budget times, and I know Big Rapids has done this, getting that information out to community members. recognizing that until, you know, it really happens in their own place, they don't feel it yet, but still being proactive and communicating those things. Whether it's through a district newsletter, having meetings, again, being a part of local community groups, being present at activities. That's the nice thing about having a family that I found when I went into this position at Foodport. It's a pretty busy position too, but having children allows you to be out there and get to know people. So it's like the perfect thing. The same is true for administrators. They ought not have surprises. So much changes on a daily basis that's difficult, but important. So good communication, whether it's via email, picking up the phone and giving a call to the high school principal and saying, you know, I just had this parent conversation, I referred them back to you, and you know, da 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 da. You know, just being on top of things. And also making sure that we're having those administrative meetings, those principal meetings. I like our setup. I'd be interested in hearing from your administrative staff what they feel is adequate and important. Our entire ad team meets twice a month, and then our principals group meets twice a month. And so I think we don't need to drag those meetings out, but typically, at least there are two things that often happen. One is administrivia, staying up on what's happening, but the other is perhaps working on that strategic plan, where are we headed, what's coming up, and so that we're always setting also that course for the future, whether it's a book study together or whatever. So we mix quite a good piece of professional development with those meetings, along with, you know, the day-to-day tasks from the district. And then I think for staff, working with administrators, what's important to communicate, making sure your staff is getting that information, again, being visible in the buildings, having an open door. So, and what have I left off? Could be web, you know, could be podcasts, could be blogs, you know, any form of using technology. The key is that the technology is actually getting used. So if there is a blog, do people know about it and are they using it? And that's part of, I think, sometimes the problem is that we're also busy, we may not actually use it to get the message. So it doesn't help to put it on the blog if people aren't using the blog. We may need to recognize that that information has to get out another way as well. You're welcome.
Wendy, if you have brought an action item to the board,
Yes.
and it became a 4-3 vote, how would that make you feel? What would you do about it?
That's a great question. If it came to a 4-3 vote, I would feel that I hadn't done my job very well. I think that by the time an action item comes to the board for a vote, that the superintendent, along with all his support from his administrative central office, et cetera, should have been able to put into place in plenty of time conversations, understanding on the part of every board member why we felt that action item was necessary, and had that support before going forward. That is the experience that I've been able to be a part of at Foodport, is being able to be very proactive, that when we get here, we're all on the same page, and we absolutely present that to, you know, everyone, to the whole public, teachers, administrators, because being 4-3 doesn't just communicate perhaps to me that I haven't done my job, it also communicates something to our public, it communicates something to our administrators and staff. And what we want to do is show that we're a united front, and that that's what consensus building is. I mean, that's what democracy is. It's about having different sides and finding the solution, and being ready to move forward with that solution by the time it gets in front of the board.
Good,
Okay?
good. Wendy, it's back to me.
Okay.
Describe the budget development process that you would use as superintendent, and how would you involve the board, staff, the community in a budget cycle of continued reductions?
Continued reductions, right, what we have been in. All relevant and timely questions. Well, in a typical year, well, let's not, I guess we won't talk typical, we're not in typical times. So as we've gone through this school year, just as everybody, it is about, you know, obviously staying in touch with Lansing, working with the business manager to recognize what we think is potentially coming. And then beginning to look at, if we did nothing, well, how would that impact our budget? What would that look like in terms of a deficit? And then coming to the board and talking about what is the board's goal. As you look at what's remaining perhaps in the fund balance, to what extent do you wish to preserve that, to what extent are you willing to spend that down, and then really having, I guess, a goal as to what those cuts might need to be ultimately. And then having that idea, knowing that it may change as a result of what happens in Lansing, we begin to speak with administrators and staff. That could look in different ways. I think what we're always cognizant, and I think public schools and any government, anytime we ask for public input, we have to be ready to accept public input. It's about the questions that you ask. So we might not want to ask the question of, do you feel it's important we preserve sports? Because I think we'll all know what the answer to that question is. But rather, when you think about Big Rapid sports programs, do you see areas where we might be able to reduce and still maintain good programming? So it's all about the questions we ask, okay? And so you can seek, I think, community input, staff input, administrator input in that process, recognizing that sometimes we don't think of it all. Sometimes we may not realize what some people are willing to go without until asked. So, for example, department chairs willing to give up their department chair stipend to save the district money. If that is an offer, sometimes unless we ask, we don't know what's out there as a possibility. And then really beginning to, before I think prioritizing, it is about looking at some of those results and asking the question, is it A, possible to do? Because sometimes people make suggestions, but they don't understand the financial background that you can't move Title I monies to do something like that, for example. Asking that important question, what will happen to programming if we were to make such a cut? So it isn't then just a matter of costing all that out, it's also a matter of evaluating how viable those options are. And then beginning to build that package of potential cuts. And some of that, of course, also, is still going to be impacted what potentially might happen in Lansing. Some of it, may have to come at the negotiating table. And again, that's a conversation that you have with your board in terms of where they're hoping perhaps some concessions can be made. And I think what else in terms of building that budget? I think we have left out. I think the other piece, though, if I could just talk about the other side of it, let's say that the district made a decision to cut some transportation, for example. That has a huge impact, but it can be a reduction of dollars. So if we make a decision to make a cut, and we recognize it's going to have an impact, making sure that we have a plan in place as to how we're going to handle that impact down the road. I'm trying to think of, we're talking in Fruitport about the potential in the future of reorganizing our elementaries. We recognize that would be a cost savings. We also recognize the difficulty of that and the kind of transition it would require, and recognizing that that's not something you do overnight, but that's something that you put a plan in over place, both in terms of when it happens, but also how do you make sure that it's the most comfortable as possible transition for all involved, so that after planning as well. Pre-planning for the after, I guess. Okay?
Wendy, you got me again. What process would you use to evaluate administrators, and how would you direct the district to deal with ineffective staff members?
Okay. With ineffective staff members.
Staff.
So administrators and staff. Okay. So we'll deal with the administrative piece first. We don't currently have this in Fruitport. However, if I could wave a magic wand and create an administrator evaluation, it would include three things. One, it would include a student achievement element, okay? Every building is required to have school improvement goals based on data. So how well are we as a building meeting those school improvement goals, okay? So part of that evaluation ought to, I think, go back and be reflected in that. Another piece of it, because it has an impact on student achievement, is the culture of the building. Whether the building is really designed and set up, has that culture that will improve the learning of both staff and students. And there's all kinds of good surveys for staff to be able to give feedback to their administrator, strengths, areas of improvement, okay? And so an administrator can set a goal from that. And then finally, I think a personal, professional goal on the part of that administrator, because we all are learners, what area perhaps is he or she interested in growing as an individual in their profession. And as a result of those three things, I think there's an opportunity to have lots of conversation. What I believe, Pete, is that no document changes behavior. I can write checklists and I can give feedback in writing, but the real growth happens in conversations. I know this as a teacher, I know this as a principal, I know this as a central office administrator, that it is the conversation with the person that helps produce the greatest growth, and I know that for myself personally, having the conversation produces the most growth for me. And so then having benchmark times throughout the year where we're sitting with administrators and talking about those goals, the progress they're making, et cetera, okay? And so whether it is, I'll lead to the second half of your question, if it's perhaps an administrator that may need to step up and improve some areas, or whether it's a teacher, we first and foremost have to start with the conversations. Obviously having a presence, both as a superintendent in terms of administrators, my presence in the building so that I can substantiate, provide some data, perhaps provide some evidence of some things that I'm seeing that I'd like us to work on together, or the same would be true for that principal and that teacher. They have to be present enough in classrooms, et cetera, to really have some evidence to work with to help them improve. Our first goal is to help improve, and when those efforts aren't fruitful by conversation, it may be that we need a improvement plan with that staff member. And I think the more specific that improvement plan is, the better. I think it's very indicative of why it's so important to have leaders who are instructional leaders. It isn't about management anymore. It really is about helping administrators who have an impact on student achievement, have an impact on classroom teachers. And they have to know what good instruction is. They have to know how to have those kinds of conversations. And I think part of my job as a principal is to help them learn those things, or maybe help them improve or grow in that capacity. So it's working with that teacher. And depending on the level that that gets to, you know, if there just simply doesn't seem to be effort on that teacher's part to improve, or it isn't there, you know, then we would, you know, go to further legal issues. I really think it's all about conversations. I have yet to meet a teacher who isn't there to do a good job by kids. Sometimes they don't have all the tools. Think about elementary teachers who have been trained in 2 subject areas but teach 4. What support are we providing them to do a good job? It is incumbent upon us to provide the support and resources to do that well. Otherwise, I don't know why we would be here. Okay, any further?
Thank you, no, great.
Okay. Thanks.
To me,
Okay.
what do you see as the superintendent and board role in the collective bargaining process?
Good. Typically in smaller districts, and I would expect the same is true in Big Rapids as it is in Fruitport, the superintendent's role is to be at the bargaining table, doing those negotiations. What I see as the board's role is helping to set those parameters of what those negotiations, what your goals would be in terms of what those negotiations might produce. And certainly then as those negotiations progress, keeping the board in the loop as to how it's going, if there are offers or conversations that are leaning one way or the other, to keep the board up to date with that progress, timely and effectively. Although I have not been at the bargaining table, I have been fortunate enough in my position. It actually used to be an assistant suit position, and so there's a lot of personnel issues that I still do. We don't have an HR person in the district, so we kind of divide it up among the cabinet. And so I have been fortunate to work with a very, I think, fair leader of our district with the Teachers Association. I think that if you were to ask her, she would say that I'm honest. I'm not going to hide anything. We're going to be honest and forthright and put it all on the table. And certainly even when I was interim soup, we had some difficult personnel that summer. So I did get to do some tough stuff that summer. But just within that, I think that she would say that we're both there for the same reason. We really are on the same side of the fence, and let's not forget that. We have some tough negotiations to do. We will start off on a different side, probably different ends of the spectrum, but ultimately we are all here for the same reason. And I believe successful negotiations start with quality relationships. If there isn't quality relationships, negotiations are going to be difficult.
How would would you ensure that you have those quality
Yeah,
relationships?
good question. I think by reaching out, having frequent meetings. One of the things I like to do is check in with her frequently, and I know my superintendent, he actually sets meetings with her, so I can see myself doing that. I check in with her via email and phone calls more often, or stopping by her classroom because of the specific area that I work with her in, which is more around curriculum and overages or teachers are working over and those kinds of things. And so we have to be very intentional, there's just no doubt about it. So it might be monthly meetings to stay on top of issues in the district, that two-way conversation, bringing things to each other, even in non-negotiation times. And that would be true of any of the association presidents, those lead negotiators, not just in this case for me, it's the teachers union that I work on closely. Okay?
On Monday morning,
Yes.
you go to work and there are 3 complaints on the answering machine.
Oh.
They're brought to you by a staff member,
Okay.
a parent, and a board member. And they're all about the same situation.
Okay.
How would you prioritize and respond to the complaints?
Prioritize.
And why would you pick that particular one?
Okay, so I've got a phone call by board, a parent, and what was the other
A staff
one?
member.
A staff member, not necessarily administrator, staff member.
Yeah, it's not specific.
Yep.
It's your fantasy.
My fantasy, absolutely not created in the way I think I would, I mean, it would depend a little bit on the level of urgency of the complaint, okay, whether I contact board first, okay? It really kind of depends on what it is. For example, if there's been a physical injury to a student, something that is involving the health and welfare of a student, I'd probably want to let my board president know right away that this is out there with a quick phone call. The second is getting to the parent and making that phone call right away, and better getting an understanding. Depending on how much information I get, okay, from that message, it may be contacting the administrator. So again, it kind of depends on what the circumstances were. But I do believe going into a parent conversation, the more information I know, the better it's going to go. So if there is some quick homework that I need to do by calling a principal to find out the background, I would do that before calling the parent back. And depending on what the issue is, again, then either responding to the staff member or asking the administrator to, because again, I think it depends on what the issue is. I think it's important that administrators don't feel that I am, throwing them under the bus. We like to say that in Freeport, throw people under. We don't like to throw people under the bus. That we're supportive. That we remind people of the proper channels. Assuming though that that's not the issue, it could be a personal walkover to that teacher, and let's say that that teacher was, I don't know, maybe a parent got so irate that the person really felt, just distraught because of what that parent said to that teacher. I would want to offer support for that teacher, but also ask that the principal do the same thing. So again, it might depend, but does that help?
So there isn't any right answer.
I know there isn't, but just if you want any follow-up, feel free to ask. So.
To me,
Right.
Wendy, what methods would you use to promote your district's image to the community, to the school community, and to the general public?
Good question. I think first and foremost for me, it's always about opportunities for our students to shine and making sure that those are publicized, and even if we have opportunities to shine inside in the community, that sometimes we go outside our own facilities and shine out there. So like, for example, tonight, Freeport's band is kicking off old-fashioned days downtown. I mean, there's always those kinds of opportunities, and are we making good use of those? I think that's first and foremost the key to, letting the world know all that our kids are capable of doing, and the good work of the staff that's helping that happen. I think that it also depends on the community in terms of how much can happen electronically over the computers and et cetera. Recognizing that not all of our families communicate that way or don't have access, but I think I think there's so much that we can do with our websites, or district websites. I think opportunities, for example, and I trust this probably happens here, when students accomplish certain things, our local Rotaries will always sponsor a certain group of students at one of their meetings, so making sure we're not missing, again, those kinds of opportunities. Anytime that we can connect with local businesses, obviously with, in this case, a Ferris State University, and get that kind of public recognition for things that our students are doing, ways that we can bridge that gap to the community and do things together, is a great media blitz that way. What else, John? Your question was how to make sure that
in the schools and out in the general public,
Okay.
so I think you're.
Okay. Yeah. It's hard because administrators are busy, we're all busy. Very few districts can afford PR people, right? So we have to just work very intentionally. One of the things that I've enjoyed at Fruitport is that our district calendar, when we send it out in the fall, highlights a lot of points of pride in the district, and that goes to every resident. You probably do something similar. We do a focus, Fruitport Focus, which is our district newsletter. Those are the times, again, where we celebrate all kinds of points of pride. Those go out to all of our residents. We also do what's called an e-news, where we collect as much points of pride from our staff members, and that goes out to all users. So it's another way of just keeping within the school system everybody apprised of all the exciting things they're doing. Because sometimes I'm a busy biology teacher and I don't always know what's happening at the elementary level. So
You're in a very similar boat over there in Fruitport as we are here, in that we don't really have a large base of local media
Right.
to do the job for us, so we have to more or less do it ourselves.
yeah, they won't show up unless
Yeah.
you call them
we
and say,
have,
get here.
we have a good newspaper,
do.
and that's it.
Yep.
I mean, a local affairs.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and the nice thing is that you do have a university. I know other communities that have universities, they have journalism students, for example, or they have, so sometimes tapping into departments like that or students like that is another great way. We have high school students. I think we always have to get creative with how we make sure our message is getting out there.
Tom also has a program once a month or whatever
Okay.
on the
I know
Fair
it's-
State.
Ferris. Good, awesome, that's wonderful. That's good. It's a great way for students to, again, those extra kinds of programs, for students to be able to learn some broadcasting skills, some computer skills, et cetera, to be a part of, developing and participating in those. These are awesome. I've seen some great things come out of those programs. Good. What else?
Wendy, how do you evaluate your own effectiveness, and how would you expect the board to evaluate your work?
Oh, great question. I absolutely would expect that if I were fortunate enough to come to Big Rapids, you've heard me talk, right? And you hold me accountable for the things that I'm saying today. I don't know how well you like your superintendent evaluation tool, but I think that there are key pieces that I would hope are a part of it and that you would hold me accountable to. And really, they probably run the whole gambit of everything that you've asked, from finances to instructional leadership to community connection to having a highly functioning administrative team, because I don't think that without that we run a very, very good ship. I also think that if there is a strategic plan in place or one is developed, that whether that strategic plan is getting implemented is a direct result of the leadership of the district. And so that would be a piece of a superintendent or my evaluation. I'm a highly reflective. I'd probably ask, and I would also encourage, just as I would ask principals to conduct culture surveys for themselves, I would do the same thing for myself. I would ask administrators and directors to provide similar kind of evaluation survey to me. Are they feeling supported? Are they feeling that this is a learning type environment, that central office is a place that they can come to and get answers? So I would expect the same for myself as I would for them in terms of seeking data for effectiveness. And certainly, but not last, probably foremost, are we noticing that collection of data, whatever that looks like for Big Rapids, is gaining momentum? If it's raising our average ACT score, is it happening? If it is the number of staff participating in graduation, you know, whatever it might be. So again, you're looking back at the data in terms of our goals for us. And is the superintendent helping make those happen? So, does that work? All right.
How much political involvement should the superintendent have to ensure their voice is being heard and understood, Nancy?
I think it's an absolute must, Kathleen. I've been fortunate this year that my superintendent has allowed me to go with him. Been to legislative meetings in Lansing, met with our local representatives, with, I think as soon as the governor began talking about both his budget plan and education plan, at least on our, over in Muskegon County, we've, I think, done a fairly good job of really mobilizing and talking to legislators, whether bringing them into our offices, which we've done, or going to Lansing and speaking with them directly. I think it's also about working through the organizations that help represent us. I think that that's key, something that we can't do on a day-to-day basis, but that they do for us, and sharing with them. I think one of the things that we have to be able to offer up as public educators and superintendents is alternatives. We're right, the budget is a mess in Michigan. We've had very, very hard economic times, and it really, truly will take us still probably several years before we see a good picture again. So instead of this, what can we offer instead? I think at least from the conversations we've had with our legislators, it's about what suggestions do you offer? And so making sure that we're communicating with other area soups and really talking about what are some ways that we recognize cuts and change in finance has to happen. And so what ideas can we offer up versus just having Lansing legislate on us, because that's just simply not okay. You're, I'm sure, aware that I think over 80 new legislators are part of that education subcommittee, and that's just not acceptable. They don't have enough knowledge, and so if we're not out there trying to educate them, that's a problem. And so it's absolutely critical. So.
Is Jeff Hansen your
Yes.
senator?
He
Jeff's
is.
a good guy.
Yeah, he is a good guy.
Really good.
Yep, when I was a principal in Hart, he was a supermarket